And we're just going to start over. I forgot to hit record. So for those of you on Facebook, we're just noting 5 minutes. Got it. Okay. So do Irides change? What do you think? I'd love it if you would let me know who you are and where you're from, because we want to talk this over together. Let's look at this set of eyes. This is a set of eyes of a client of mine, a man in his mid-40s. And he came to me and we did these beautiful photos. These were taken with one of my Iridology cameras. We worked together for about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, and then we did his photos again. So what do you think we've got here? Did his eyes change? Did the irides change? Here is his right eye, old image, newer image. Did the irides change? Yes or no? What do you think? So here's what I'm going to say. In this case, the eyes didn't change at all. What changed is the technology. When you look at the image that's on the left of your screen, that was taken with an 8 megapixel digital camera, which was state of the art at that time. It had an incandescent ring flash, which is a very yellow light. The image on the right was taken with a 24 megapixel camera with an LED flash, which has a very blue light. The LED is very blue. So this is one of the things that we often see on Instagram and on social media, is that people are making claims that their eyes have changed. But when we look at the image, we know the images were taken with different cameras. So we have to then ask, how much did the technology alter the output? And in this case, everything. 24 megapixels cannot give us the intense definition. I'm sorry, 8 megapixels cannot give us the intense definition that 24 megapixels can, right? The LED light is going to make everything look more yellow, where, sorry, the incandescent light is going to make everything look more yellow, where the LED light is going to make everything look more blue. You get the dead giveaway by looking at the skin tones, and look at how different they are. This one is much more orangey. This one is much more pinky. Even looking at the sclera in the image on the right is much more pink. The one on the left has a little bit of a yellow undertone. And so when we see this and people are saying, oh, look at how my eyes have changed, we need to ask the question, what was the technology? Did the technology change? Did something else change? Even if the technology is the same, so even if I had done both of these images with the same camera, if I know how to use my camera properly, I can also, hi Sayed, good to see you on Instagram. I can also change the white balance in my camera. That will make the images look entirely different. I can change the amount of flash. That will make the images look entirely different. And so we need to be aware that when people say their eyes have changed, I'm not saying their eyes didn't change, I'm saying ask about the technology before you fall in with, did their eyes change? Hi, Amelia, good to see you. Thanks for joining us on Instagram. So really, the better question to ask isn't, did the eyes change? The better question is to ask is, what changes can we see in the irides, and what do those changes mean? This is the most important question to ask. And I would love it, regardless of where you're at, if you're joining us, let me know who you are and where you're from. I like to know who my audience is. I've been an iridologist for 40 years, for 4 full decades. The first 10 years of that was as a Jensenian iridologist, or a North American iridologist. And I had been taught that if we put people through cleanses, if we put them on the right supplements, we would see their irides change. After 10 years as a Jensenian iridologist, I nearly walked away from it. I was just about ready to give up and to literally to just walk away. And then I learned constitutional iridology, and that totally changed my mind. So that was really an important turning point, because as a Jensenian, even with the strict diets and the really intense supplement programs, didn't see the iris changes. It was frustrating. Went to constitutional and started to learn what the real deal is with eye pictures. What I also learned very sadly was that some of the authors who had published books had made claims that eyes would change. And because they were against publishing deadlines, they used color filters, or in some cases, they actually used eyes from different people. So they had one person as the before image and somebody else as the after image. So are you ready to learn what constitutional iridology teaches about how and why irides change? If you are, give me a thumbs up. Let me know. All righty. Here is one of the things we know about ways irides change. Pigment may be acquired or become more dense. What we know is we do not cleanse pigment out of the eyes. Pigment is inherent, and even the fact that pigment is building in the eyes at various times is all happening based on inherent triggers. So it's not environmental triggers. It's not, did you eat the right things? Did you drink the right things? Did you do the right exercise? The eyes change because of inherent predispositions. So when we see that an eye has built more pigment, it tells us that inherently something is programmed to happen. We know that not all of our genes are turned on and activated when we're born. We know that over time, over living, that we sometimes activate genes that we didn't want to activate. And that is something that happens when we're looking at irides. So let's look at these. These pictures were taken again with different cameras about 20 years apart. This one was done with a print just an SLR single lens, whatever camera, but a professional quality camera. This one was taken 20 years later with my 24 megapixel digital camera. I want you to look for a moment, and do you see the biggest difference between these two eyes? Notice how all the landmarks are the same. Yes, we've already accounted for the difference in the color being the difference in the camera, so we're not concerned about that, that one looks a little more gray and one looks a little more blue. I'm looking specifically between about 30 minutes and about 42 minutes. When you look at between 30 minutes and 42 minutes, and then we look at this one, do you see the difference? Do you see what I'm looking at? You'll also notice that the pupil size is different between the two. That again, in this case, has to do with the intensity of the lighting. The lighting on the older camera, the print film camera, was not nearly as bright as the one with the LED light. So we know that these are the same eyes. The markings are in the same locations. What has changed though is in the newer one, can you see the pigment? Now this pigment acquired in those 20 intervening years. Now that's interesting because this fellow is now in his mid-60s, and over the last about 15 years, he has developed itchy skin. When you understand your symptomatology and your physiology, you will understand that itchy skin is often an indication that the liver is struggling. And so he is constantly on various liver supplements in order to keep his liver caught up with its work so that we can get rid of the itchy skin. These eyes, again, are the same person, taken with two different cameras. Notice the shape of the light artifact here and here. This one, again, was a print film camera. This one is the LED digital camera. And notice how, again, we have all of the various little markings, the individual fibers. We've got a little fiber running down here. It's in this eye as well. So we can match this up. We've got a fiber running across here. and it is running across here as well. So these are the same eye. Take a really close look at Freckles. Freckles is probably the best way to name them, Freckles. And look at the freckles here. Over the 20 intervening years, this client has added freckles. We've got freckle, 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 freckle. We've got lots of freckles. Freckles is such a funny word, isn't it? And so when we look at that, we need to ask, what does this mean? Well, the color of the freckle or the color of the pigment tells us which organ has an attitude problem or which organ is out of balance, wants to be out of balance inherently. And then when we look at where that freckle is sitting, it tells us which organ is bearing the brunt of that imbalance. So when we see a brown freckle, it suggests that this client has a potential, an inherent predisposition towards a liver imbalance. When we see it sitting in various places, this one says the liver wants to shoot itself in the foot. Each of these other ones is in a different organ reaction field. And what they mean is the liver wants to create stress for those organs. So when we're working with this constitutionally, we are not going to necessarily address each and every pigment placement, because unless there is a symptom there that needs to be addressed, it makes more sense to work with the root of the problem, which is the organ that is creating that colored pigment. So in this case, by supporting the liver through diet, lifestyle, emotional habits, things like that, what we will see is that we reduce the stress on other organs in the body because we have balanced out the source of the stress. Does that make sense? So with constitutional iridology, we don't need to go in and work with every single marking. We need to understand how the markings work together in order for us to get a better picture of what's going on in the body. Here's another change that happens over time. This is called a lipemic diaphysis. And the lipemic diaphysis may appear, or it may become more opaque, or it may expand its circumnavigation. So we'll often start off as just a sliver of a white band, and gradually over time, it often increases to go all the way around. We rarely see this marker in people who are under the age of 20, and when we do, we address it immediately. Sometimes we'll see it between the ages of 20 and about 40. We see it more between 40 and 60 and a lot in the ages over 60. So the age of onset of this marker dictates what we need to do to create the underlying balance. Okay, so that's really important. If this person is 80 and we're just starting to see this, it could just be the cornea aging naturally. If we see it in someone under 40, we know that we are going to have to work with the liver enzymes, because this has a strong correlation to the liver not metabolizing carbohydrates properly. And so we will need to go into the liver and give it ongoing support and do the dietary corrections, correct the carbohydrate intake in order for this liver to start behaving itself and in order for the person to not suffer the fallout of the liver misbehaving. Is this lipemic diaphysis going to disappear when we do everything perfectly? No. Just like the pigments we've seen in the other eyes will not disappear when we do all the right things. We also know that with time, the pupil shape may change. Now, the pupil shape is dictated by the brain, and it correlates to the spinal alignment and thereby also the nerve feed within the body. So when we see that a pupil has flattened areas, this tells us, hi DIY, good to see you. This tells us that the spine has a long-standing subluxation, that there is a long-standing misalignment that is impacting nerve feed. So when we see this, we can actually correct this one. This is a dynamic indicator. This is not a genetically or an inherently predisposed indicator. This is a dynamic indicator, the shape of the pupil. Usually by the time we see a flattening like this, it means that that subluxation, that spinal imbalance has been in place for a very long time. What that means to the client is they are going to have to be very vigilant with their spinal care for a very long time if they want to see the pupil become round again. All right, and what is the side benefit? Are we doing the spinal care just to make the pupil go round again? Absolutely not. We are doing the spinal care to take the pressure off the nervous system so that we can potentially improve the nerve feed through the affected areas. So when we're doing iridology, it's never about, are we going to change how the eye looks? If you want to change how your eye looks, get colored contact lenses. What we are really doing is looking at what is the chemistry, what is the balance, what is the alignment in this body, and further to that, can we make improvements in the chemistry, in the balance, and the alignment? And the way we know we're doing that is really through how the client feels. Are the client's symptoms remediating? Are they fixing? Or is the client doing better, feeling better, and noticing it? So some ways that irides do not change. Now this is really an important one because you're going to see all kinds of crazy claims. The first thing that doesn't happen is healing lines. Now when I first learned iridology 40 years ago as a North American iridologist, I was taught that these lines in here were healing lines. What we actually know now is that they aren't. They don't form, they don't develop and disappear and things like that. What we know is the eye is made up of a few layers of fibers. So these threads that you see in the eye, we have a few layers of those, like layers of cloth. And when we have a gap like this and we see these fibers, there's actually a gap in the top layer of fibers. And we are looking at the fibers that are one layer down or two layers down or three layers down. So this isn't healing lines. These didn't magically appear because the person did the right things. These have always been there. They always will be there. Okay, so healing lines do not appear. Lacunae do not get smaller. So what's a lacuna? A lacuna is one of these oval or leaf or petal shapes in the eye. You will see people saying that they disappear, that they mean that there's a weakness and you can get rid of that. Well, they mean that there's an inherent predisposition to something. That doesn't necessarily mean there's currently a weakness, because remember, the eyes give us information that goes back 3 or 4 generations. This might be the trace end of something the person inherited. But it used to be that iridologists would have a photo like this, and then they would have a photo like this, and they would compare, for instance, this lacuna, and this is all the same eye, to this lacuna, and they would make the claim that the lacuna had changed size. Now, I'm going to bring my camera back a bit. Can you see what's really changed size here? What has changed size? Did the lacuna change, or did something else change? Hi, Philora. Hi, Misa. Good to see you. What actually changed is the pupil size, right? The pupil size. When the pupil gets smaller, it pulls the fibers straighter. That's going to make this lacuna look narrower. But just like a balloon that is inflated, it can be one shape where you can squeeze it and stretch it and be the other shape, but it still has the same volume. So these lacuna did not get smaller. Their shape morphed because of the pupil size. The shape hasn't changed permanently. When this pupil gets big again, when this person goes into a dark environment, this lacuna is going to be exactly like this again. Okay, so we don't see that lacunae get smaller. But can we see potential health challenges that could arise? And yes, we can see that through pigment. We can see that through if the pigment particularly is placed on or near a lacuna, but we don't see the iris color change. And I mean, we've got, again, two different cameras here, 1 and 2. You can even see on this one to this one, but there's a slight color variation, same camera, same setting, taken within like 10 seconds of each other, right? Photography is notoriously inaccurate for color reproduction. We can't use photography to accurately assess color reproduction. So we know that there's a lot of ways the eyes do change, and that those changes are the result of just things that are happening around us. They're not permanent changes. For example, pupil size, pupil shape, things like that. We do know that some things that are in the eyes, we can acquire pigment. We know we can't disperse pigment. We can't erase pigment. We're not going to turn those hazel eyes blue. It doesn't happen. And so we need to be aware of what does change and what doesn't, so we don't lead clients on with bad information. Now, I'm not going to give you a big sales pitch here, just a 30-second heads up that the next go round of Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology starts on Wednesday, October 7th at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. To get on the email list, go to iridology.education and opt in for the iris map download that I'm giving away there. And that will put you on the list to be notified of when we do these. Another thing that I'm going to be starting is we will be starting to take registration for this course way in advance, and you will get an extra bonus for doing that. You will get connected to the self-study version of the program. So if you want to start studying right away, you can start with the self-study, which has, you get your recorded lessons, your textbook, your cheat sheets, your iris map, but you don't get support. You don't have access to the Facebook group. You don't have access to the live classes to ask questions. But if you have done this option and you have registered for the full program, like I said, you get access to the self-study way in advance. Then when the full program begins, we migrate you over to the full program to where you've got all kinds of support. Hello, F.A. Port, good to see you. And hi, 13666. I always say that wrong. 13666, good to see you too. And so when we're looking for this next class to start October 7th, if you want to start learning iridology right away, let me know. We'll get you registered for this program, but give you instant access to the self-study program so you can start right away. And then when the course actually starts on October 7th, the live course starts on October 7th, I will, of course, give you access, and then you have access to all of the live classes, as well as all of the personal support that we offer. So for those of you who are interested in this, shoot me a Facebook message, shoot me an Instagram message, let me know that you want to get in on this, and we'll have a conversation and help you get organized. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope that's been informative, and I look forward to seeing you Wednesday, an hour earlier at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, when we will do our next live event. Take care and have a great day. Bye for now.